Warning. You've reached On the Box with Ray Comfort and are now in a biblical truth zone. Place all questions about theology, current events, and evangelism on the box, where they'll be weighed against the truth of God's Word. Ready your hearts and minds. You're about to be inspired and equipped to fulfill the Great Commission. Programming to engage in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to another exploratory edition of On the Box with Ray Comfort. I am the easygoing sidekick. Sitting at the dean's desk is a ridiculous, pathetic, empty-headed nobody. And this is... there he is.
Well, there was nobody there.
Nobody. And this is the chivalrous Ray Comfort.
Chivalrous.
You're chivalrous, man,
yeah,
right?
That means that's Old English, isn't it?
Right.
Chivalry.
You know, the knights and those that showed courtesy.
Mm-hmm. And shining
jacket
armor
over the puddle, the whole deal.
That's it. And lady steps on it, and it's actually a big hole.
Right. Oh, boy. Don't ever do that, Ray. It's great to have you back with us. Hope you all had a great weekend. Ray, you had a great weekend. What'd you do?
Well, I went hunting the beach and preached, and when we arrived there, a guy started walking along with us for no reason. Scotty and I were laboring and heavy laden. We had so much stuff, the same stuff Peter had and Paul had, when they preached in the book of Acts. We were
sound systems and boxes
all sorts of stuff. And this guy says, boy, you guys are carrying a lot of stuff. And I said, he just started walking with us. He's maybe 55, 60, hard-looking guy. I said, what's your name? And he told me his name, and I said, what do you think happens after someone dies? He says, I don't like talking about that stuff. I just like talking about football. And I says, I tell you what I like about football, where Jesus said, whoever looks upon a woman to lust after her has committed adultery with her in his heart.
You did not.
I did, and I says, that's the stand. You got to face God on Judgment Day. He provided to save you so you could be forgiven and escape hell. And he didn't know really how to handle that.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it was a transition.
3 second, on the spot. Work it in any way you can. Gospel presentation.
It was funny.
Oh, that's great, Ray. Well, we had a great weekend, too. We did my daughter Summer's rite of passage celebration. It's something I think I've touched on here before.
My wife went to that, got home at 11:30 at night, which is late for her. And apparently it was a very, very happy time.
It was. I'll touch a little more on it.
I was being sarcastic. Everybody there cried their eyes out.
Oh, boy, right. I know. I said to them, welcome to Cry Fest 2012.
It was a cry fest of joy, and it really shows the emotion and love that comes out when you're a Christian, because you love God with all your heart. And, I find myself in tears often just thinking about God's great love and what's happening to this world. And so it does something to your emotions.
It was awesome. For those of you that don't know, I've mentioned it before, and I'll talk a little more about it in connection with what we're talking about today. But this was basically, a coming of age celebration and an actual official initiation into womanhood of my daughter by women that have been a part of her life for many years.
Is it like a Christian bar mitzvah?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. It would be that. But, the depth of the spiritual context of it, that these are godly women who are coming alongside her and helping to usher her into womanhood. Today we have a lot of boys and girls transitioning into adulthood, really, by way of default rather than by design. And so to have had these godly women there, each of them having written her a letter expressing to her their love for her and also giving her godly wisdom and advice, it's like a treasure that she'll have with her for the rest of her life.
We should publish it.
Oh, yeah. And then I came at the end of the evening and I read her my letter and then prayed over her and then gave her a purity ring. And
you came down in a suit and tie in your own home. That really shows you dress for the occasion.
Right.
If you go to be with the president, you don't go in shorts and a T-shirt. You show respect for his office.
Yeah.
And that really shows the respect you had for the situation.
Yeah, it was a proud day as a dad. My daughter, turning 14, becoming a woman, and just that, she was in tears, and just to think that this will go with her for a lifetime. It'll help shape and mold her. So
well, now that my wife had a wonderful experience on Sunday afternoon.
Yes.
She went outside. Sue went outside, and sitting on top of the hose we got these little ceramic squirrels everywhere.
Right.
And she thought, why did Ray put a ceramic squirrel on top of the hose, whatever call it? And she reached out to touch it, and it was a rat. And I was inside of my computer, and it's amazing how intuitively we know screams when you stub your foot, a scream when you see a husband in his shorts, and a scream when you see a rat and actually touch it. And I recognize this was serious.
And she doesn't scream much.
Oh no, she's quiet. She's conservative. So running out, and there's this rat in a corner carrying like a dirty rat, and me and the dog looked at it for a while, and then it ran to the chicken coop.
That's
where
crazy.
it lives with this other rat friend.
Right, you got to take care of that problem.
Yeah, well,
right?
you suggested something.
Coop.
Yeah. They don't hurt. They're just friends with the chickens.
Right.
They hang around when they've got to have some buddies.
I think it wasn't a possum. I hate possums.
I
hate rats too, but possums especially.
What about cougars?
I love cougars. Love to grab a cougar.
See, some guy got into a zoo. And
I read about that.
Was it one with a lion?
Yeah, he wanted to be one with a lion.
Well, he's just about one with a lion. It was his stomach.
Insanity.
Yeah.
I guess they had some wires or something.
I laughed at one of the networks said the man, after being mauled by the tiger, is in good condition.
Did it maul him, actually?
Yeah, I think it did. Something happened. He said he's in good condition physically.
Right.
The influence.
That's about it. No sane person would jump in with a tiger. Although, there was a guy I read about who actually jumped in to preach the gospel to a lion.
This is years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's preaching a bad idea.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
All right.
Please do not do this at home.
Yes. Questions, suggestions, thoughts, please email us to onthebox@livingwaters.com. I forgot our email address. It's Monday, guys. Give me a break. Please email us. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter. All right. Question of the week. We're going to be giving away Hell's Best Kept Secret this time. A wonderful book, Ray. You've never actually read this book, have you?
No, it's written a funny accent.
Right.
Right. Nice glossy cover.
Law of the Lord is perfect, yeah. So send us in your question, please. See that picture there? Ooh, what is that?
That's my friend. He's a skydiver, and he actually skydived, and he read it on the way down. He's crazy. He does these really crazy things. He's a wonderful guy.
Oh, that is
I'd love to give his website if I could remember it. But he's a great friend.
What an experience.
The publishers wanted to call that Watering Down the Gospel. They didn't like Hell's Best Kept Secret, and I sent an extra, I think, 65 alternatives to Watering Down the Gospel.
I remember that.
And after 3 months, they changed their mind and said, Hell's Best Kept Secret. And I thought, all my work.
Oh, that's great. Well, be sure to send us in your questions, and we're going to select, as always, a question of the week, and we will send you that book.
I just got to say, if there's any atheists here from San Diego, I got on the website and noticed that an atheist was wanting a ride to the conference I'm speaking at this Saturday, and I tried to get on and say, we'll pick you up on the way through.
Right.
And I couldn't get through the website. I mean, it's just tight. You've got to get passwords, and I think I had to join San Diego Atheists just to say we'll pick you up and take you. So I can't remember the guy's name, but if you're part of that website, that's why I tried to join the Atheists in San Diego, just so I could offer them a ride. I
think you're going to have 100 people in your car, Ray. You're opening an invitation to atheists to get a ride?
So, So write to mark@livingwaters.com if you're that guy that needs to be picked up, and we'd love to pick you up.
I can't wait to see the response. All right, Evidence Bible quote. Secure sinners must hear the thundering of Mount Sinai before we bring them to Mount Zion. Every minister should be a son of thunder, as well as Barnabas, a son of consolation.
You chickened out.
I can't
He asked me earlier, he says, how do you say that word? I said, Boanerges.
I've always struggled with that one, and everyone says it in different ways.
It's Boanerges, if you're from New Zealand. That means son of thunder.
Boanerges?
Boanerges, yeah.
Right. What a powerful quote.
It is. It's incredible. Whitfield was amazing. For those who don't know who he was an English?
Yes.
English preacher. Was greatly influential in the revival that broke out in the 1700s in America. But wonderful preacher. And he said here that you've got to preach law before you preach grace. No one is ever going to put on a parachute unless they first understand they have to jump out of the plane. That's the kind of principle. No one's ever going to take a cure unless they first understand they've got the disease. So we must be sons of thunder before we can be sons of consolation or sons of comfort. That word consolation means comfort, for want of a better word.
And again, people oftentimes will look at those that use the law as preparation for the gospel, and they'll see it as being harsh or being hateful or being, as though we do that for the purpose of antagonizing people. But by that same token, you'd have to say the same thing about Jesus and his firmness in speaking truth when it needed to be spoken in order to reach the heart of his hearers.
And doctors.
Right.
A doctor's got to talk about the disease or the person's not going to take the cure. And that's as simple as that. You'd never say a doctor is unloving because he said, I've got to point out this disease. It's not going to be fun, but it's very necessary if you're going to let us give you an operation to save your life.
You know, I often think of one of the gentlemen in the 180 video. I think it was the guy with the cigarette through his ear.
Yeah.
And you took him down the line, and I mean, it was so winsome the way that you did it, in telling him, I think this is what you're doing in terms of wanting to create a God in your image. It's not that you really don't believe in God, but here's what you're doing, and you love your sin, and does that make sense? And he goes, makes perfect sense.
It seemed to pierce his ear.
Right. I mean, the light went on, but I look at that, and to me, that's the perfect example of what Whitfield is speaking here. And when we speak about, you know, bringing down the thunder, we're not talking about a tone of harshness. We're not talking about being, overbearing, but it's speaking that truth. You know, that gentle word that can even break a bone. And that's what I loved with that guy, is you were speaking to him with such tenderness and gentleness, but speaking the truth and power, and it prepared him for the gospel.
And when a doctor tells a patient he's got a disease, he doesn't yell at him.
Right.
There's power in his words because of the sobriety of that which he's speaking of.
He can whisper it, and it would have, you know, the same impact. I preached the gospel to George Whitfield in England before he got saved.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're not as young as I thought you were.
It was awesome. It was just this guy in the airport, for those of you that know George Whitfield. And I finished sharing the gospel with him, and I said, yeah, great to meet you. My name is Easy. And he goes, yeah, I'm George Whitfield. And I started laughing. I go, and he goes, what, Mom? I'm George Whitfield. I go, come on. I go, you know who George Whitfield is? And he said, no. I thought, wow, this is in England.
Yes.
You bear the name of one of the greatest preachers that ever lived, and I didn't even know who he was.
And no one had ever pointed it out to him.
Right.
Yeah, it's like being called Elvis Presley and no one mentions anything.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving right along. Our topic for the day. Here is an article that is sure to spark a good conversation today between us and also between you that are at home viewing. One out of every 7 Los Angeles high schoolers with a cell phone has sent a sexually explicit text message or photo, according to results of a 2011 survey that also found sexters more likely to engage in risky sex behaviors. In the new study, the LA teens who had sent racy texts were 7 times more likely to be sexually active than those who said they'd never sexted. Ray, what kind of world do we live in today?
We live in a crazy world that's absolutely changed. When I was a teenager and we wanted to see some sort of sexual picture, I'd have to send I remember doing this, sending a friend into a store. He came back with this black and white newspaper with some racy pictures on the back. Nowadays, any teenager, anybody can have instant, explicit, pornographic images right in their face. And it really explains why Christianity is becoming so hated in this nation. Back in the 50s, pastors were kind of respected, and the Bible was respect 10 commandments. But now there's this hatred, and it's because of the fact the more men get into darkness, the more they're going to hate the light. The more evil a criminal becomes, the more hatred it'll have for the police. And that's why police officers are hated, not because of who they are, but because of what they stand for. He'll be killed, murdered, just because he's wearing a badge. And I've got up to preach often, and before I've even said anything, just people know I'm going to talk about God, there is venom and hatred comes from certain people in the crowd. I say, you don't even know me. You don't know what I was going to say. And they say, yes, I do. And they're filled with hatred, not because of who I am, but because of the badge I stand behind. Of righteousness. And that's what's happening with our nation. The more they get into uncleanness, the darkness of illicit sex and pornographic images, the more they're going to hate the light.
And the thing that is so disturbing is the desensitization that comes along with it. I think even for parents today, and some of you that are watching, it's almost a given that kids are going to do it. And so parents have let their guards down. Parents are discouraged. They want to try to do something, but they don't know what to do. And I think that it all goes to the heart of what you train your children on from the very beginning, and the foundation you give them in godliness and righteousness. I mean, just this past weekend, like I said, with my daughter, I looked around the room and saw it filled with these godly women. Some of them talking about, the mistakes that they know are made by young people, and speaking from experience and where they were and so forth.
Could I just say something here? Maybe those that are watching that are unbelievers get the image that these are very elderly ladies that are sitting around with knitting and talking. No, these are very gorgeous, pretty ladies who are godly and speaking from their own experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of them young mothers, and but all married women who've experienced life. But to think my daughter is sitting there, when I think of what I was doing at 14, I didn't have that guidance. I didn't have that training, that instruction. I mean, my parents loved me. They did the best they could, but they weren't Christians. They didn't.
Moral boundaries are a token of love from parents.
Right.
This as far as you can go. If you let a kid go, it means you really don't care.
Right. So engaging your children at an early age and dealing with not just the outward actions that they live out in their lives, but a heart committed and dedicated and devoted to the Lord. Because if you don't deal with the heart, then, no matter how many boundaries you put in place, and I'm for putting boundaries in place. I'm for making sure you have, a protection software on your computer at home. I'm for monitoring your children's cell phones and their internet activity and so forth. But no matter how many blockades you put in, no matter how many safeguards, if your children's hearts aren't right with the Lord, if they don't have a fear of God, if righteousness is not modeled for them in the home, then they're going to find it somewhere.
And not only that, they can go into the computer of their own imagination,
right?
Which is sin against God.
Absolutely.
So you want to have pure thoughts. And it's very important to understand that there's pleasure that can be had in lust. The night of my conversion, I've looked back and analyzed actually what happened to me. When I saw that verse that said, whoever looks upon a woman to lust after her has committed adultery in his heart already, the first thing that happened to me was, oh, no! And it wasn't, oh, no, I've sinned against God. I was, oh, no, God's taking from me that which I live for, because every sin, or everything in life that I strove to give me pleasure and enjoyment, I had to strive to do it. Was surfing, I had to travel, right wind, get cold feet, shark bait, and then you surf and you get pleasure. Parties, you have to go out, you get drunk, and it took a while to happen. You had to work at it. But last was instantaneous pleasure, instantaneous.
Portable with you wherever you go.
Take it wherever you go. It's just like, I'm bored. Ooh, I'm not bored now.
Right.
And God was saying no, and I thought, no, this is party pooper. But then I saw scripture that says, lust, when it's conceived, brings forth sin. Sin is conceived, brings forth death. I thought, whoa, there's a reason God's telling me not to do this. And then came the explosion of revelation that God so loved me that he stepped into a human body and took the punishment for the sins that I had committed in my mind. That's what brought the contrition. That's what brought the brokenness. And that's what helped me under God to find a place of repentance and say, okay, pleasurable though it is, no more. And so for 40 years, I've continually fought lust. Never once have I gone searching for pornography. If I did sin with my eyes, say, God forbid me. And you've got to walk in the fear of the Lord and not play the hypocrite if you're a Christian.
Right.
But you don't want lust to bring sin, and then sin, death, and hell. And God has no pleasure in it.
Right. And, I'll never forget as a new believer finally grasping the reality of how sin is enslavement. And like Romans talks about, he who obeys sin is a slave of it.
Absolutely.
And I'll never forget, one day it just dawned on me. And I remember just looking up and saying, wow, I don't have to do that anymore because I'm free. And I was talking to the kids the other day and saying, look, sin is slavery. When have you ever seen a cigarette running around fiending for a pair of lips? Oh, I gotta have a pair of lips, right? But what do you see people, oh man, I gotta have a smoke, Yeah, when do you see an alcohol bottle fiending for a hand to hold it and drink it,
Yeah.
But the flip side of that
and same with heroin and all the drugs. They become slaves to what they give themselves.
And people have a perspective of Christianity of, as you Christians, you're so, you're so oppressed, you can't do this, you're slave. Really? I'm free because God doesn't want to keep us from things that are pleasurable. He wants to keep us from what's destructive and harmful in the end. I mean, you look at marriages where pornography is an issue. They break up like that because the man's after an illusion that's not real. Now he becomes dissatisfied with his wife.
She doesn't come up to expectations.
Right, and ends up leading to adultery. And so parents, we just want to tell you, with those of you out there that are concerned, your kids are getting to an age where maybe you're going to get them a cell phone, or they have a cell phone, or access to the internet. Please tend to their spiritual state and be there as someone who's going to speak into their lives with tenderness, with love, and reach their hearts.
There's a paradox when it comes to freedom. A train finds complete freedom within the confines of the tracks.
Right.
It doesn't find freedom jumping off to find another means of expressing itself. But in the tracks, it finds freedom. That's what it was created for.
Right.
And when we're yoked to God through Christ, when we are disciples and we're disciplined to Him, we find complete freedom in that straight and narrow track.
Analogy.
It's just,
I like that.
and it's the same even with football. If you've got a game of football where all rules are obeyed, that everyone is disciplined, you've got a free game.
Absolutely.
If people want to do their own thing, it's absolute chaos and blowing of the whistle, infringement, got to stop to do this, a penalty here. So freedom comes from discipline, and it makes no sense to sinful human beings.
And freedom involves responsibility.
Absolutely.
I think another problem, too, that we end up often seeing is the things that kids are pulled by translating into the physical, too. It's not just the sexting or the pictures or the pornography, but sexual immorality in relationships. And I think that oftentimes Christian parents today don't step back and evaluate what their approach is to that whole subject. Dating, relationships, having a boyfriend, having a girlfriend. And so I want us to roll a video here in a second that I think really sheds light on the issue and can be a big help to you parents, helping to keep your kids from destruction. So let's roll this video by Vodi Bakum.
When she goes out on these dates and she goes out on what? Find that one in the text. Find it in the text. Find that concept. The modern American dating concept in the text. It's not there. You have betrothal. You have marriage. You have relationships between individuals who intend to marry. You don't have this idea of people who just kick it because they like each other for right now. That's how you end up with the wrong one. You get involved before you evaluate. That's a problem. That's a problem. And again, as a father, here's the picture that our culture paints. Our picture paints this culture. A father is doing his job if, when a young man comes over, a suitor comes over for his teenage daughter, he sits down, and he's got this intimidating pose, and you stick your chest way out, and you bow all up, and you take your rifle out, and you're cleaning your rifle, and you got a big old, some snuff right there, and you spin your stuff, and you clean your rifle and stuff. And what time you supposed to have her home? What time you scare him up real good. That's our culture's picture. And we think a man's doing a good job if that's what he does before his teenage daughter goes out with a young man. Let me just change the scenario, just briefly. Just slightly change the scenario. Same picture. Except now, I have a $200,000 Lamborghini Testarossa in front of my house. And a snot-nosed 17, 18-year-old boy who has not yet walked into manhood, because our culture hasn't asked him to, is going to come over my house to drive my $200,000 Lamborghini Testarossa. Am I going to be satisfied just cleaning my gun and scaring him real good and then giving him the keys? See, here's what bothers me. Our culture has taught you to value a $200,000 car more than a man's daughter. That's sick. You gave your $200,000 car to a 17-year-old boy? You're an idiot. But when I said that about my daughter, you thought I was crazy. Why? You've been lied to. That's why. I'd much sooner give up the keys to a $200,000 car than to take a chance on some young man manipulating and abusing the emotions of my daughter.
Wow.
Very powerful. What a great analogy.
Isn't it?
And
you think about that. It's true. I mean, what guy, and I saw a Lamborghini recently, and I'm a guy, and I love Lamborghinis. But, the thought of, yeah, right, I'm going to let some 17-year-old kid walk up on my doorstep. All right, hey, be careful. Okay, here's my Lamborghini. That's insane. But he put it so well. We value materialistic things more than we do our own. But he said, why are people doing that? They've been lied to.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just an acceptable thing. Hey, they're young, let them have a boyfriend, let them have a girlfriend. And there's never this perception from parents that can lead to the destruction of their children.
Absolutely.
Ray, you were a young kid, and you were in that realm. Was that something you thought of, walking in purity with your girlfriend when you were a young kid?
No, I told the story before. When I was 16 years old, I found myself lying in long grass at about 9 o'clock at night in the darkness outside a dance with a gorgeous girl that I just so admired. And I leaned over to her, and she looked back at me and said, "You know what? God's watching us." Bucket of ice. And I said, let's go inside. But seriously, even though I wasn't a Christian, the fear of God kept me from doing something that could have destroyed 2 lives, even more than 2 lives.
Right.
And I so thank God for that, her saying that, you know.
Absolutely.
You know.
But, you know, that's what happens. You know, young kids get into these relationships and there's no boundaries and their hormones are raging. What do you expect is going to happen? I mean, the ages that kids are getting sexually involved is decreasing more and more and more.
Right.
And so with our children, you know, we've taught them from the very beginning about the pitfalls of that sort of thing. And what I'm talking about is this lifestyle and attitude in connection with casual dating. You know, having a boyfriend, a girlfriend at 12, 13, 14 years old. I mean, what's the purpose of that? And like he said, show me in the text where that's a biblical norm for us as people to casually date and get into these relationships where emotions are involved and so forth. It's absolutely destructive. And a great book on the subject is a book by Joshua Harris, I Kiss Dating Goodbye.
Yeah.
And we're currently reading a book with our daughters called Before You Meet Prince Charming. And it talks about the principles of teaching your kids that the courtship model, that when they're ready for marriage and a gentleman is interested or you know, the Lord orchestrates the situation, that they can court with boundaries and with godly guidance and so forth.
Walking in the fear of the Lord.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So please, I urge you, get involved in your children's lives on this level, and know that the fruit that you might be seeing in some of your children's lives that is ungodly fruit really deals with the heart and where they're at spiritually. And so cultivate that basis of communication, family devotions, gentleness and tenderness and love, where your children are going to be open to receive from you, and guide them in the ways and in the fear of the Lord.
Now, we didn't get through the script. Are we going to carry on tomorrow?
Yeah, possibly. Maybe we'll continue that tomorrow. Tomorrow we were going to talk about Vice President Joe Biden getting a tract.
Whoa, that's exciting.
So we'll hop into that. We'll see if we have time for anything else. But please be sure to join us tomorrow. And in the meantime, please remember, we live in the midst of a lost and dying world. We have the gospel of everlasting life. So go out
Amen.
And be a light for his glory. God bless.
For questions about On the Box with Ray Comfort, or to submit questions for future shows, please email onthebox@livingwaters.com. That's onthebox@livingwaters.com. On the Box with Ray Comfort is an outreach of Living Waters. For more resources to inspire and equip you to fulfill the Great Commission, check out livingwaters.com or call toll-free 1-800-437-1893. Now go and preach the gospel.